Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Michael Anthony. I am the lead organizer of the Bathurst Manor Action Group. And one of the things that the Action Group does, among a lot of different things, is we try to engage people, all of our members and beyond, in democracy, not just around election time, but throughout the entire year between elections. During election time, one of the things that we try and do is bring all of the candidates that are running in a given election together so that we, the community members, can meet with them and engage with them and have our questions answered, but to get a feel for who the candidates are as individuals. Unfortunately, because of COVID, we are not able to get everybody together in one room. And so we are making use of the wonderful technology provided to us by the internet, but mostly by Dan Warner. So I want to thank Dan. I know that he can't stay too long this evening, but he's the man that sets everything up for us on the tech side. So Dan, I want to thank you very much again for doing this for us. The way that this whole thing is working, and I don't just mean this evening, but I mean over the election period, is that I have reached out to all of the campaigns, or as many as I could get in touch with, and invited them to have this forum where members of the community are able to engage. So we are very lucky this evening to have Julius Tiangson, who is here. He is the candidate for the Conservative Party of Canada. And I want to thank you, sir, again, very much for being here. And we are also very lucky to have from the Armed Forces, a reservist and part of law enforcement, Mr. Sam Nacarado. Sam is going to be asking the 7 questions that are going to be asked of every candidate. And we will also be asking anybody to put questions or other comments in the Q&A for the questions, and anything with respect to comments in the chat. I urge everybody to be respectful. This is not a forum for negativity or whatnot. I was brought up in a fraternity where we firmly believe in positive talk. And so I really hope that we can abide by that here out of respect for everybody who is giving their time to be here, as well as for the process. Before I hand things over to Sam, I want to say to Julius, I admire anybody who puts their name forward to serve our country. It is something that not many people have the drive, the courage, whatever word you want to use, right? So I want to say that I really admire you putting your name forward and for being engaged in this process. So I thank you very much for that. And Sam, I'm going to pass things along to you, and then to Julius for his opening words, and to go through the questions.
Thank you very much, Michael, and thank you to the Matt. I was speaking to Michael previously, just briefly about this, but community mobilization is something that we can see from all ends of the spectrum and is so important in our community. So I do want to thank you, Michael, for organizing these. I have no problem personally asking Mr. Tiangson the questions. And Mr. Tiangson, I hope you can hear me okay?
I can hear you okay, but at times you're breaking.
Okay, I'll try and speak as clearly as I can. It's good to see you. Nice to meet you over the interwebs. Wasn't home when you came by, unfortunately. The first thing I would want to know is just a little more about yourself. If you could share with the members of our community a little bit of information about your history and anything you want to make known to us before we start some of the more formal questions, I'd like to hear from you.
Sure. But before I proceed, Sam, you were in the, did you serve in the armed forces, or are you currently
Yes,
serving in the armed forces?
I am currently serving in the armed forces, yes.
Well, thank you for your service and continued service to our country
Yes,
as well.
thank you very
Let
much.
me
I
just
appreciate
begin.
that.
Yes, let me just begin by simply, a simple introduction of who I am. I came as a 21-year-old kid more than 35 years ago. It was in the middle of winter of 1985, and I came in January 11, 1985, in the city of Saskatoon. Landed in the city of Saskatoon. It so happened that that's the birthday also of John A. Macdonald, the first conservative prime minister, was the founder also of Canada. I came as a 21-year-old kid with $65 in my wallet, and at that time also there was quite a bit of a turmoil coming from a country like the Philippines. Turmoil because we were ruled by a dictatorship, and then at the same time there was a struggle also in terms of the communist insurgents as well as Islamic secessionists at that time. And I grew up in a city where about 20 to maybe 25% of the population were in fact influenced by the communists. And so when my father saw an opportunity that I can actually get out of the country, and he said, take that opportunity, and paid for my airfare and cobbled at least $65 in my wallet and landed in the city of Saskatoon. Fortunately for me, I was in a job exchange program, or I came through a job exchange program, which allowed me to work right on the second day or the third day that I arrived in the city in a company called Deloitte Haskins and Sells. At that time, now it's called Deloitte. Was with them for almost a couple of years. And then shortly after that, when Deloitte had said that, you have to make a decision whether you wanted to immigrate to Canada or not. And so I made the decision to immigrate to Canada and transition from a temporary foreign worker and become a permanent resident in 1987. From 1987 on, I started being engaged within the context of my faith community. And the consequence of that is I left my accounting work or auditing work. At that time, I was considered a computer application specialist or an IT in today's designation. Wanted to work within my faith community, started a number of faith communities in different cities, at least 18 different cities across Canada. But within the context of serving in my own faith community, I started also a community center, a nonprofit organization, or an NGO, if you will, that has served anywhere from 40 to maybe 50,000 new immigrant children and youth year after year. Pioneered a couple of notable programs that is being implemented right now, or has been implemented within the context of integration in Canada, which is called the Settlement Worker in School, and iTracks also for young people. So those were programs that we did pioneer within that organization that I have founded. And then shortly after I semi-retired in 2012, and just like any other retirement, I failed in retirement. And the consequence of that started a bit of my own business. And primarily in the financial services. I went back to financial services and started also some investment consulting and partnered also with a number of developers. And now I partner up with a builder, and we build infill lots, custom built homes or design and build homes. Currently, we're looking into designing or actually developing a subdivision out in the Niagara area. So that is in a nutshell my background. I am married to the love of my life, Nona Lee. I fondly call her Bunny. And we've been married for over 33 years. And just like any typical Filipino/Asian family, we send our kids to Waterloo. So we have two boys who graduated from Waterloo and a girl that graduated also, or at least tried to complete um, her training at Sheridan College in Brampton. So they all are quite independent. One is working in the UK. The other one is suffering because he runs a dance studio, successful dance studio, but suffering these days because of COVID. And my daughter, who lives with us, is actually a person with disability, but thrives because of her creativity and continues to improve herself. And in fact, has launched her own business, which is card making, and particularly, thank you cards, seasonal cards, all of that she makes handmade. A very creative person, and I enjoy watching her thrive in that capacity. So that is in a nutshell what I have become and what I have been, and most likely that would serve as the foundation in which I would be able to serve a community like York Center.
Excellent. I think most Canadians can identify with immigration as a big part of our community, right? I
Yes.
know personally, my grandparents arrived here in the 50s by boat, right? So I think most people in Canada have that story of immigration. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to ask you the first question for our standard 7 questions. Okay, the first question is, why are you running to represent the York Centre riding, and what sort of connection do you have to the riding?
Well, York Center is no different than any other ridings really in Canada. It is truly a microcosm of Canada. The interest among the residents of York Center is the same as in the interest in Scarborough Center, in Eglinton Lawrence, in Mississauga Streetsville, in Mississauga Center, in Brampton. The interests of people, their concerns, their dreams, their aspirations uh, are literally are are the same, and the differences that we have in terms of our interests is very minimal because we all want the same thing. We want good jobs. We want uh, education for our children. We want safety for our family. We want a hopeful future, and a future that would truly capture that Canadian dream that many immigrants would come or have chosen to come to Canada. I'm running to represent this riding because I do have the skill set, I do have the background, and I believe I am the best candidate that can truly represent the dreams and aspirations of many residents of York Center. My connection to this riding is the fact that for over 22 years, I have been the lead advocate for the change of the live-in caregiver program, a successful change and reframing of the regulatory policies that govern that program, making the program more fair, more safe, and then at the same time, more accessible, particularly those participants that will bring in their families over. So my connection is very deep because of that. My connection is deep also because the fact that I have worked in settling and integrating newcomers. I understand the newcomer experience. I understand what they're going through. In fact, the vividness of their experiences and the vividness also of what I have gone through is truly identical, and I can identify with them. Now, with regards to obviously long-standing, and I often would refer to them as long-suffering Canadians. Obviously, I can identify with them because I have truly embraced what it means to be a person who has chosen Canada as my country and have identified myself as Canadian more than anything else. So that is my connection to this riding, and I am running to represent this riding because I truly believe that I do have the qualification, the skill set, the experience, the multifaceted experiences that I've had over the years to represent every single interest that residents of this riding have.
Excellent. Thank you for your answer. I'm going to move on to question number 2. what are some of your ideas or initiatives that you would bring forward or champion as we deal with COVID-19 as a nation?
Well, I have four things in mind, and I've always answered this in a number of forums and a number of town halls that this has been asked of me. First and foremost is we got to make sure that the rapid testing for COVID is implemented in this country. Very, very important. And I think the technology is out there already and it can be implemented right now. There's no reason why this liberal government is actually delaying the implementation of that. We can have that implemented in this country right now. Now, the consequence of that is you remove the fear, you remove the apprehension of people. And as a result of that, the second thing is children would feel safe, parents will become safe. They can send their kids to school, understanding that everyone has been tested, including their teachers and whoever is it that the children are interacting with. So they will feel safe. And thirdly, we can then begin to open up the economy and making sure that the economic engine of this country, which is small businesses, can actually reopen again and reopen safely without fear, without apprehension among those that are patronizing the small businesses. But the fourth important thing that needed to be done is how do we connect with each other as a community again? How do I connect with you, Sam, as a person without this fear and apprehension that you may be a carrier of COVID-19? So it would take some time for us to be able to repair that in such a way that we can begin to connect as communities, as a community. Now, in York Center, in as much as we are a diverse community, but then I can also notice that there is the Jewish side, and there is the Filipino side, and there is the Tamil side, and there is the Vietnamese area here, and the Korean area here. We tend to congregate with people that are similar to us, but then at the same time, as a result of COVID, we become more apprehensive in terms of how we connect with each other. So there needs to be a lot of work in order for us to once again feel that we're part of this human family and become part of York Center as a community. So there's a lot of work that needed to be done in that area.
Excellent. Okay, thank you for that answer. I will move into question number 3. We are a community which is politically engaged year-round. How will you structure your engagement with us as individuals and as a collective community?
I love it when you say that, you know, this group or this action group is actually engaged politically year-round, because it is a two-way street, right? I may be your representative to Ottawa, and I will be bringing something that is what we feel are issues that we should be dealing with, and when we would share that with you. But then you also need to reach out also to me in such a way that it becomes a two-way relationship, and that's what it means to represent the community, and that's what it means also to reach out to your representative. Now, obviously, because this is a huge riding, I do have an administrative plan for it. I've looked into the whole riding, and it is massive. It is over 110 or 115,000 people. Over maybe 75 or 80,000 are probably citizens, and the rest are still either non-citizens or tourists, or what we would call as undocumented as well. Now, from an administration point of view, I look at the map of the riding and I said this can be divided truly into 6 zones or 6 areas. And what I intend to do is to make sure that I connect with each zone at least a couple times in a year, even more. That really depends on how the community would actually organize themselves. And for somebody like this group, or somebody like yourself, Sam, as well as those who are behind the Bathurst Manor Action Group, that will be a lot easier for me, because now there is truly an active group. Now, that could be my job also, but that could also be the job of the citizens within those zones to actually get themselves organized. And this is where my skill set actually comes into play, because I am a community organizer. I love engaging the community. And the consequence of that engagement, it becomes a two-way street, not just a one-way direction coming from Ottawa, and this is what you guys need to be doing, or this is what we need to be following through. It doesn't work that way. Democracy is a two-way street, and I would respect, obviously, the people that have sent me to Ottawa, and I would make sure that the interests and all of the things that matter to you guys are in fact being heard within the context, obviously, of our caucus, and then in the issues that I will be championing on your behalf.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your answer, Julius. Next question we have is question number 4. We care greatly about the success of our local small businesses. What ideas will you bring forward or champion to support our local small businesses now and in the future?
Well, for a small business to thrive and to prosper and succeed, obviously there is a need for access to capital. Then secondly, the ability to operate. And then thirdly, would there be people that you could hire and be part of your growing, or at least attempting to restart your small business? And then fourthly, are there customers? Again, let me frame this obviously from a larger perspective. The larger perspective is we need to get the health file fixed first, which is rapid testing. Get that fixed. The second aspect is in the area of access to capital. And this is where I think government can play a very important role in terms of negotiating on behalf of the small business owners with institutions that do dole out the capital, such as banks or credit unions. Or it could be that the government would actually create, not necessarily a permanent bank, but almost like a Schedule A bank just for this moment, in such a way that access to capital will be available to small businesses. Remember, they are the ones that have been hit the most. And if we continue to lock down our small businesses, it's going to be disastrous 3 months, 4 months, 5 months from now, because over 50, if not 60% of them will not have the ability to open up and begin to operate and introduce their businesses to others. So very, very important that access to capital is made available to them. Now, then at the same time, obviously, when the whole framework of the health file is being addressed properly, then we can open and operate our businesses. Then we can begin to hire people that have been helped either through SERVE or through wage subsidy, and invite them back and once again rehire people. But then obviously we need to make sure that those who are patronizing these businesses, that they are, these are customers, and that they can engage with the small business quite safely. So some ideas: access to capital, perhaps a freeze in interest payment on a line of credit that could be done through this temporary Schedule A bank. I don't want to say that it will be a Schedule B bank, or probably even contract this out through a maybe maybe any of their credit unions that may be amenable to this, make them the carrier for this program in terms of access to capital.
Sorry to interrupt, Julius. One quick clarification: is this an idea that you have yourself, or is this an idea that the Conservative Party has?
Oh, these are some of my ideas that I've been thinking through. Obviously,
excellent. I just wanted to clarify if it was part of a platform of some sort.
No, we are a party, and that is something that can be discussed also. Now, and I have had this experience in running my own business, that access to capital is indeed very, very important to many businesses. So those are ideas. It could be also the way to access capital is to maybe here in York Center, set up a York Center community bond, right? Where small business owners can actually access the community bond kind of thing. So perhaps there's an opportunity where we can develop that through either the credit union or through an existing Schedule A bank. So those are things that can be done. I mean, from a perspective of the Conservative, in as much as access to capital is something that should be left to the people who are transacting business with each other, the bank or the funder, as well as the business owner. But then at the same time, we are in unprecedented time. And that unprecedented time requires that we have some creativity in our thinking so that access to capital is made available, right?
Excellent. Okay, thank you so much for answering that question. Can I just move on to the next question here? So the next question is, what are your main areas of interest and concern regarding local environmental issues? What do you see as a solution and plan to implement the solution to environmental issues?
Well, let me frame this from my earlier involvement with First Nations communities in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. In the first 5 years of my integration in the city of Saskatoon, I got introduced to a good friend, happens to be at that time a theological student, and his name is Ray Aldred. Ray Aldred is now a theological professor, and Ray is also a First Nations individual and have greatly understood what First Nations understand about creation and the concept of us being stewards of this land. And because we are stewards of this land, we are given that responsibility to manage it properly in such a way that it does not compromise the air that we breathe, the water that we drink, the land that we till and use so that we can grow, and obviously also all of the other created beings in it. And so from the context of stewardship, one of the areas or one of the things that I think that we could begin to offer to people in terms of, at least something that we can begin to consider, is how do we then, from the existing energy production that we have, how can we innovate this in such a way that it is a reflection of that stewardship, a reflection of what it means to be managers of these resources in such a way that we can still have clean air, we can still have clean water, we can still have a wonderful forest that is being managed properly. All of the things that we care so much about in terms of our environment, and I certainly one has partaken of the beauty and the wonder and the magnificence really of nature here in Canada. As you know, my family, when I was raising them up, we normally would go for about 2 to 3 weeks camping out in northern Saskatchewan, as well as in Alberta. We haven't done that here much in Ontario. We've done it once many, many years ago. But that is within the context really of within the context of stewardship. Now, what do I really see as a solution and plan to implement the solution? Well, it has to be technology driven, has to be innovation driven, has to make sure that we do have that balance of the environment and the economy. And it does not need to be a binary choice, but there is something that we can truly implement and put our collective heads and technology and innovation in such a way that we can achieve both the preservation of the environment as well as the progression of our economy in such a way that it will produce good jobs for people.
Okay. Okay. I don't want to go too far off my my thing here in terms of the questions I've been asked to ask you, but just can you clarify a little more when it comes to environment? What sort of plans, like definite plans, do you think you could make to address some of the issues that we're having? Because, you know, there are some international things going on right now when it comes to climate, you know, whether it be global warming or otherwise. Could you speak to that a little bit?
I think there is a Canadian solution in terms of achieving some of what you know, the Paris Accord would like to achieve. I think the level in which we wanted to make sure that, you know, greenhouse gases are being reduced, and we need to understand also that there is an advancement in technology, innovation in technology, innovation in energy creation also as well, that has truly been world class. And you look into Saskatchewan with their carbon capture, and in terms of, you look into also in the oil sands, in terms of how they've managed and rehabilitated, again, the whole concept of stewardship and redemption also as well, of that which we have used. We need to look into that even more, and understand that there is both a responsibility within that sector, our energy sector, and there's also a responsibility also of the community. And the fact of the matter is, from a perspective of the First Nations communities that have supported many of our energy innovation and energy extraction, we can learn from their concept of stewardship, their concept of management of resources, and the redemption of that which had been used already for our own consumption.
Okay, thank you very much for your answer, Mr. Tiangson. I'm going to move on to the next question now. This is question number 6. The federal government is responsible for foreign affairs. There are many nations that York Center residents care about. What are some areas that you're particularly engaged with or passionate about on that front of foreign affairs?
I am one that has facilitated in the past of communities from other nations that have come and settled in this country. A good example is Ethiopia and Eritrea. And at that time, I was a young minister in Saskatoon and got connected with an Ethiopian fellow that I began to start to mentor, and he introduced me to his community. They don't have an association, but then they also have, but then what's really interesting also is that the Eritreans also were started to come. And there's quite a bit of distrust, but then at the same time made an effort and exerted a lot of time and energy to make sure that these communities would actually come together, and they formed their Ethiopian Eritrean Association, regardless really of the issues that they have left in the countries or the areas of the world that they've come from. Both communities have decided that they would learn what it means to be a Canadian and respond to these issues as Canadian. And I think community leaders like myself need to continue to model reconciliation of people, where we have a great deal of work that we can do in order for people to start to understand each other and understand also what it means to be a Canadian in addressing these issues. And I think if we can bring some of these groups that may have left their countries because of some of the difficulties that they have faced, and now they are here living in the same community, how do we then bring them together in such a way that they're not just addressing that as people who have come from those regions of the world where there are difficulties, but we would bring them together in such a way that they would in fact embrace what it means to respond as Canadians to those issues.
Okay,
and I
thank
think
you very much.
I really think it can be done.
Well, we are known as peacekeepers, so I'll just add
Yeah.
that on, because I know that that's something that we're known as. The last question that we have here for you is question number 7. We have been a community that over the last 3 or 4 years have been discussing issues around women's rights and anti-Black racism. What have your thoughts been as these issues have been at the forefront of human rights discussions?
If I can preface first with a story. Back then when I was leading a nonprofit organization and started a community center, or at least rented a building to start the community center, we were renovating the community center. An imam approached me. He said that he wanted to have his Juma prayer started in the community center. I don't have any problem with it. But I said, there's one area which is really nice, and there's one area that is still under process. And after several Fridays, I noticed that the men goes to the nicer areas and the women went to the not so nice area, dingy, cold. So I asked the imam to please sit down with me and raise a concern to him. I said, Imam, you are letting my mother, my sister, my wife, my auntie, my Lola or grandma sit in that dingy room. And he could not understand what I was saying. So I repeated again, Imam, you made my, my wife, my mother, my sister, my auntie sit in that dingy room. And finally, after the third time I have repeated to him, he finally understood. The following Friday, he invited me to his Juma prayer. And he announced, we will have still a barrier in terms of prayer. There will be a barrier that will be set up, a curtain. One side will be the men, the other side will be the women. Traditionally, normally the women sit behind. But for the very first time, as I know it, particularly for that Juma prayer, the women and the men were beside each other, albeit there is a barrier. I'm not afraid to confront people that may diminish the rights of women. It's hard fought rights. I'm not afraid to confront people that would diminish individual rights of and freedom of women who have made their choice for themselves. I can respect those rights. None of us may probably agree that every single right that has been accorded to us according to Canadian laws is something that we can all embrace, but it is something that we can all respect and make sure that those rights are protected, respected.
Okay.
Now,
Mhm.
go ahead.
If you wanted to continue on the point of anti-black racism, I'm sure you can say something about that as
Sure,
well. That's one of the points I brought up in the question.
sure. And in terms of, let me just frame this also, not just necessarily from um, the perspective of anti-black, but maybe um, discrimination or or the lack of, well, I would say, yeah, within the framework of discrimination as a whole, and part of the conversation that is happening right now is the whole discussion concerning anti-black racism, and and that is something that is something that we need to confront from every aspect. The fact of the matter is that I have been in the forefront of not just confronting people who may violate individual rights and freedom, but I think we all need to be in the forefront also of confronting um, people that may judge us by the color of our skin, um, and instead of who we are as a people and the substance that we bring to this country. One of the things that I have championed within our campaign in here is that we need to be interculturally integrated, meaning that we with respect to the founding nations of this country, but other cultures have come, other peoples have come, and what they bring are good values that reflect who they are, and they're beginning to share that also through the festivals that we see, some of the celebrations that we all enjoy during the summer months. That is part of what it means to be in Canada, and we should not hesitate to celebrate that and champion that and make sure that that within that context of respect and understanding and interculturally integrated, ensuring that people are not necessarily being generalized according to where they've been, what they are, where they come from, but in fact they will be looked at as individuals that we can respect and we can understand and embrace.
Okay, excellent. That's going to be it from me for the night, Julius. It was a pleasure to meet you. Thank you very much for speaking with me and having me ask those 7 questions. I'm going to pass it over to Matt. Matt has some questions from our audience. I'm going to step away for one quick second. Matt?
Thank you very much, Julius. Thank you for joining. And again, thank you very much, Michael, for organizing this. So Julius, what I'm going to do, I'm going to ask some questions from the audience members who are listening in. And to the audience members, I may paraphrase what you say, and feel free to add in the comments if there's something further you'd like asked. The first one, I've been listening to you, and you haven't spoken. You've spoken very positively, which I think is a good quality when running for government. But I did wanted to ask you, just to insert a little bit of partisanship in here. When you've spoken to York Centre residences and from your own experiences, what concerns have you heard about with the path of the current government? And if you became a caucus member of the Conservative government, where would you want this country pushed differently?
There are three concerns that I have. I mean, there are different areas in York Centre. I've been to areas where predominantly there are seniors, so obviously they're concerned about the fiscal, the fiscal picture of our country, and the recklessness in which this government has treated the fiscal file is something that is worrisome to them. Would there be something that, in terms of services, that will be available to them? Would the government still be there for them if the revenue that we have will be siphoned by bondholders, foreign bondholders? So that's one. The second, the fiscal file. The second is obviously the more pressing to many parents or many families with small children, is how can we safely get back our children to school? I believe that this current government has really failed that health file, and making sure and the timely closure of the border, and so they have failed that miserably. And the fact that there are therapeutics and there are also rapid testing that is made available in other countries already, why is it that we cannot begin to embrace and adopt that in here so that children can safely go back? The third thing, I've talked to a lot of young people. I enjoy talking to young people. That seems to be the thing that I enjoy the most, talking to young people. And just like my own children who are in their mid-20s and late 20s, when I came here, I was 21 years old with $65 in my wallet, and I somehow had found that Canada is a land of opportunity. I don't know if I can say that for my own children who are adults right now. I don't know if the parents of these young people that I've talked to can actually say that also for their own children. Young people are very concerned. Would there be something for me for the future? So those are the things that is very, very crucial, at least that is close to my heart. So what I would do if I am to be your representative is I would push for more rapid testing. I would ask really our caucus, why don't we look at all the possible solutions out there that has been successful in being implemented in other countries like Singapore and Taiwan and even in South Korea? Why can't we look into that? Why can't we look also into how we can safely open our businesses, knowing that rapid testing has already been implemented? So those are some of the things that I would really push our caucus in terms of influencing this, because I know after door knocking thousands of doors and engaging with thousands of people, I know where the heart of their concerns. They are fearful. There is apprehension. And I think it is refreshing for the residents of York Centre that I, who wanted to represent them, actually would take the time and knock on their doors, engage them, even for a minute or 5 minutes. This is welcome. This is welcome by the residents of York Centre, and they're so glad that they see me and me wanting to represent them, and that I can hear them. I can hear what their heartbeat is, and I know that there is apprehension, there is fear, but it brings great comfort when community leaders like myself actually go to their door and say, this is what we will do for you.
Thank you. It's a question now from one of the audience members, the question which comes from some of the issues that have been raised on social media regarding your campaign. The question is that the Campaign for Life Coalition has recently endorsed you. So the asker would like to know for you to state your position on a woman's right to choose and how you would vote if restrictions on abortion were put forward in Parliament.
Again, I've come from a place in the world, in the Philippines, where our individual rights and freedom have been restricted to the point where it was so fearful for us to actually come out after 5 in the afternoon. Those individual rights and freedom is something that I would respect here in this country, and it's something that I would protect in this country. Meaning, those individual rights of women to make their choice is something that I would respect and would protect that right for them. Because those are hard-earned, hard-fought rights. And it is the law of this country. And because it is the law of this country, we must respect that law, and all Canadians must respect the law from the perspective of preserving, upholding, and protecting individual rights that have been hard fought.
Thank you very much. On a similar vein, the question was asked, what is your position on same-sex marriage, and would you vote to restrict it? I think we all know that this has been settled in Canadian law some time ago, but one of the audience members would like to know your thoughts.
Again, this is an individual rights issue. This is a freedom, individual freedom issue. Those are hard-fought rights by Canadians, and we need to respect that. I may not necessarily support some of these, rights that have been granted, but these are rights that have been given to them. And I need to respect that and make sure that these rights are protected and respected.
Thank you. The next question, so you had touched on the concerns of anti-Black racism. Again, there's been some talk on social media, and I'm sure you know an article in the Toronto Star about a tweet that you put out commenting on Leslyn Lewis and United States Vice Presidential candidate Kamala Harris. There have been concerns expressed from the Parliamentary Black Caucus in Canada. Do you have any comments to respond to people who have concerns with that tweet that you made?
Well, first and foremost, I believe it's a distraction, really, that the Liberal member of Parliament that has, resurfaced that tweet, a distraction from their failed policies. And secondly, I think it has been taken out of context. I mean, I do have a great respect for women like Kamala Harris, who would actually seek public office. It's very hard to seek public office, regardless wherever you are, either in the US or in Canada. But then at the same time, also, I don't think that, one day when you win an election, you identify yourself as one particular race and embrace that and bring pride to the people that you're representing from that race. And when there is an opportunity for you, and I think of that as an opportunity for her to be able to increase her vote in one segment of society, that all of a sudden she would fully identify with another person's, or with that particular community's race. I don't think as politicians we should be doing that. But then at the same time, I am, again, respectful of the fact that people like herself, myself, and others are seeking public office. But then at the same time, we need to be authentic, we need to be true and to who we are, and making sure that we're not out there just to increase our vote, but literally we're out there to represent all people. Again, we are supposed to represent all people.
Thank you. The current Liberal government's been embroiled in this scandal related to the We Charity, and there have been attempts by the opposition to reopen committee debates about this. What do you think needs to be done? Does what's taken place with the We scandal strike you as a concern? And if so, what would you do differently in a Conservative government or as a member of the Conservative caucus?
Full disclosure, at one time my son was an employee of We a long time ago, and has left that organization, I think more than 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. Can't remember now. When he was there, you know, it was a very good charity. A charity that has done a lot of good to many Canadian children and young people. Unfortunately, that charity has been dragged down by this Liberal government into closure, primarily because they mishandled what could have been a very, very important program that We Charity can actually be implementing. And I can put the blame clearly in the hands of the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister for failing to recuse themselves. Primarily because they don't see that there is a line that needs to separate them as public officials and a particular group that is supposed to receive public money and be doling out, or at least would be creating programs on behalf of the government. And I think it is very important that we do have the full story to be told to Canadians. How did it get to the point where a very respectable charity in the past would be dragged by two prominent public officials, the Prime Minister, nonetheless, and the Finance Minister, two very high-profile public officials? The story needed to be told. And as opposition, we need to make sure that the full story needed to be told.
Thank you. York Centre, as you know, has one of the largest Jewish communities amongst the various ridings in the country, and many of whom, amongst other Canadians, take a keen interest in Canada's relationship and friendship with Israel. I'd like to know your thoughts on Canada's relationship with Israel, what changes, if any, you would make from the current government's policies. And there have been questions as well, and I think your leader, Mr. O'Toole, has commented on it, about the notion of Canada's embassy presently being in Tel Aviv rather than Jerusalem.
Israel as a nation, as a state, don't have a lot of friends in that region. It's making new friends now, and I'm very, very happy to witness that and to see that happen actually in my lifetime, in our lifetime. And I think we need to celebrate that blossoming of many relationships in that region. We are Israel's ally. We are Israel's friends. And Israel is our friend. Canada must extend that strong hand of friendship to a country that is that has not many friends in that region. Primarily because we share the same values, we share democratic principles and processes. Those are important values that Canada have, and something that we have in common with the state of Israel. We need to make sure that the state of Israel has a friend in Canada, that when it finds itself in a belligerent status or in a manner in which it may need some action, forceful action, Canada should be prepared to stand with Israel when needed. But then at the same time, I think we need to celebrate the fact that there are friends or other nations that are making friends now with Israel, and we need to continue to encourage that and encourage other countries in that region to have a different view and a different relationship with Israel. And it would serve us well as a country and restore our image around the world as one that can influence the other nations in that region in ensuring that friendship with Israel would blossom and would grow with the other nations in that region.
Thank you, Julius. You'd mentioned when you were discussing your past experience about the live-in caregiver program, and I gather from your comments that you've had some involvement in that, and there's many residents in York Center from different perspectives that have experiences and challenges with that. You'd mentioned you were involved with the recent changes, so are you supportive of the recent changes that mean that after employers pay the fees and sponsor a caregiver and wait for a year, that the caregiver is then able, rather than having a closed work permit that's tied to that employer, has an open work permit and can accept employment from other places? Do you see that as a positive change, or positive for some people, negative for others? What's your feeling on the changes that have been made?
When we invited, or at least when we offered a job placement for these caregivers, they are tied to a specific employer. I think there is a great move, and I think I would support a move and a request actually coming from many of the caregiver groups that I have connected with, that it would not necessarily be tied to an employer, but it would be tied to a sector, such as the caregiver sector. And so if there is, in fact, a violation of employer-employee relationship, that particular employee can easily transfer without necessarily going through the process of applying for a new work permit and changing that. And that means there will be a gap of maybe 1 month, 2 months, or even 3 months. And for the meantime, they are without any employment, and you would put them even in a more precarious situation. So I would support that move, where it becomes not necessarily employer specific, but it will become more sector specific. That means if there is a bad employer, then that employee has the right to be able to say, I quit, I resign, then I can easily move and transfer my employment to another employer. Now, obviously, the live-in caregiver program is one that is legislated, so therefore we can only just tinker really with the regulatory framework, and that is one that I would actually support.
Thank you.
Right. So, Mr. Tiangson, I want to thank you again so much for meeting with us, for answering our questions, and for participating in this forum. As I said at the very beginning, anybody who puts their name forward and jumps into a campaign is incredible in my books. There are really not many people who would take that leap. And so I want to say to you that I appreciate that very, very much. And I thank you for stepping forward to be someone who would like to represent our riding. So thank you, sir, for being with us. I would also like to thank Sam and Matt and Dan for their work in making sure that this evening ran smoothly. And of course, I want to thank everybody who tuned in now and who's going to watch this video later on. I want to remind everybody that this is one of our sessions with the candidates. Coming up, we do have a session with Max Bernier. I will be posting about that later on in the different Facebook groups. On Wednesday at 8:30 p.m., We have just finalized, like actually during this meeting here, we finalized a meeting with the Green Party of Canada candidate, so I'll be posting about that later on. And I am still working with the NDP candidate to book a time with her. So again, I want to thank everybody, and that brings this evening to a close. Have a wonderful evening, everybody, and please make sure that you get out to vote, all right? Everybody get out to vote. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Julius.
Wonderful to meet you.
Thank you, Julius. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, take care, everybody. Thank you very much. Good night.